Om Nama Sreshtham Manumapi Shachi Putram Atra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajamurupurim Amaturim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaram Aho Radhika Madhavashan Prāpto Yasya Prasita Kripaya Sri Gurum Tang Natosmi Nindang Tang Pulakotkareṇa Vikasat Nipa Prasuna Chaving Prodhi Kritya Bhujadvayam Hari Hari Tyuchairvadantam Muhu Nrityantam Galadasru Nirjarachayaiha Sinchantamurvitalam Gayantam Nijaparshadaih Parivritam Tam Gorameva Stumaha Alipih Paripalitah Pravalitah Sanandamalokitah Pratyashang Sumana Falodaya Vidho Samodamamoditah Vrindaranya Bhuvi Prakasha Madhura Sarvatishayi Sriya Radha Madhavayo Pramodayatu Mam Ulalasakalpadrumaha Jairupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath Chai Gosaira Kori Charana Bandhan Jaha Hoite Vignanash Abhishta Puran Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Jai Sri Radhe Jai Jai Sri Radhe Jai Jai Sri Radhe Shyam. So without any further ado, let's go right into this. So kvacid ekatva-śabdenāpi tathaivocyate. So he's continuing on from the last talk, and he's saying that the ekatva, the word ekatva, so we've had samya, tadatmya, ekatva, all these words are being used to indicate the oneness, the unity or the sameness of the jiva with the paramatma, the jiva with Brahman. So there's this idea of the oneness with Brahman. Remember, when we're talking about Brahman, Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti, Shabdyate. Anything that is said about Brahman has to apply to Paramatma and has to apply to Bhagavan also. The reverse is not necessarily true, unless one understands that Bhagavan is another manifestation. It's actually non-different from Brahman. So even the Advaitavadins will accept that, but they'll put a little bit of an asterisk on there in their understanding. Right? So Bhagavan is Brahman, but Bhagavan is Brahman within the false nature. And in some ways we can even, it's just a question of which is precedent, which one has precedence. Does Brahman have precedence or does Bhagavan have precedence? They're one thing. So in the nanatva, the variegatedness of the world, which includes the presence of God as the ultimate creator, as the ultimate supreme manifestation, as the totality of the created world and so on, that is also a manifestation of Brahman, but it depends if you see one as having precedence over the other. As Vaishnavas, we say that Brahman, the effulgence is the effulgence, just like we were using the example of the sun and the sun's rays. So all the manifestations of energies that are in the universal creation, those all expand from God. They're not separate from God, although they have separateness. The energies are separated from Him, but they're also a part of Him. So that's the achintya part that we have to understand. But these statements about Brahman, the idea of ekatva, yes, the ekatva is there, but there is a pritaktva also, as was stated in the previous part, that prithag ishvare tad swarupanubhavecha. There are two things going on here that are separate. So sometimes the word oneness or ekatva also means similarity achieved through acquiring similar properties, the tadatmya. So atra tat-sāmyaṁ yathoktam nirañjanaṁ parama-sāmyam upaiti. So that's an interesting quote, because it says tat-sāmyaṁ upaiti. So what is it? If you look at that verse, that's the third section of the Mundaka Upanishad, and it's the first chapter. The Mundaka has 6 chapters, right? And they're divided into 3 books, let's say, and then each of these has 2 chapters. They're very short chapters, 10, 12, like that, verses. So I'm not sure, I think there's about 60, 70 verses altogether in the Mundaka. But anyway, the third what do they call it? I forget the names of each of these chapters is a different kind of name. But in that particular chapter, the first 2 verses are very famous. Right? It says, like, say, Dva suparna sayuja sakaya samanam vriksham parishashvajate tayor anyah pippalang swadvati anashnan anyo vichakasiti samane vrikshe purusho nimagno nishaya shochati muhyamanah jushtang yada pashyati anyamisham asya mahimanam eti vita-shokaha. So it's already had this. So these are I'm using a translation that I found somewhere. I think this is well, I wonder, we must have it. It's probably, let's just have a quick look here. I'm looking at the paramātma-sandarbhe, which I just happen to have right in front of me. So, yes, here it is. So let's just see what our translation is. So dva suparna sayuja sakaya samanam vriksham parishashvajate ekas tayor kadati pippalanam anyo nirashnan abhichakashiti. It's a bit different, right? So I think this is also in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, but that third line is a little bit different. And there's also a mistake here in the Sanskrit. Somehow or another that escaped all of us. All of us grand scholars who are supposedly studying this work in deep profounder and checking and rechecking and so on. How many hundreds of times it was gone over and nobody noticed that there's this fault in the Sanskrit here. Anyway, so it says there are 2 birds who are ever related and who thus share an intimate friendship sitting on the same tree. Of these 2, one eats the pippala fruit, which is full of divergent taste, while the other shines in his own glory, merely witnessing without eating. In the second verse, samane vrikshe purusho nimagno anishaya shochati muhyamanaha. So this is that one of them is in the same tree of the body, the individual soul is helplessly bewildered and constantly grieving. When he wisely turns to the other, who is always served, who is jushtam by his energies, you could say, and looks upon him as his Lord, then he gives up his suffering and realizes and enters into his glory. So that so already, this Brahmaiva son, Brahmaiva, what is it exactly here? Because then we go to the third verse. So that third verse is the one that's actually being quoted here. That, excuse me, let me have a drink of water here. Right. So yada pashyate rukmavarnam kartaramisham purusham brahmayonim tada vidvan punyapape vidhuya nirañjanaṁ parama-sāmyam upaiti. When the seer sees the God, the golden-colored Purusha, the ultimate agent or creator of the universe, the one who is the source of Brahma, or the source of the Veda, then that knower washes away both the bondage of sin and virtue, and without any attachments, attains that's the nirañjana. So usually nirañjana, that's the word that we use, without anjana, without any colorings, without any, the three colorings, red, white, and blue of the material nature, red for rajas, blue for tamas, and white for sattva. The colors of the spectrum are that creates this material world in all its variety. So nirañjana means to be without any coloring. So that he attains the supreme sameness. So Shankaracharya, the supreme sameness, advaya lakshanam. So that advaya lakshanam, but here all this that's being said about the two souls, the two birds in the tree, and then this the kartaramisham, this purusham, brahmayonim, all these different descriptions of the paramatma. So he attains supreme sameness. Well, what's that sameness? It's the same as in the second verse, the mahimanam, asya mahimanam eti, vita shokaha. So free from all, he attains that state, that Brahman state. But in that Brahman state, there are varieties. Just like the bird that enters the tree appears to have merged with the tree. But in actual fact, it continues to have it has its nest there in the tree. And there it has its other bird friend. So, and also in the Bhagavad Gita. So in the Bhagavad Gita, another term is being used, saddharmyam. So in the big Bhagavad Gita it says, having taken shelter of this knowledge, they have attained the same characteristics as me. Idam jnanam upasritya mama saddharmyam agataha. So this is a very good word here, saddharmyam. So it says that having this knowledge, so taking this knowledge, they attain to the same characteristics as me. So the saddharmyam. So remember back to the to the Vishnu Dharma verses that were quoted, the 7 verses that were quoted at the beginning of yesterday's, or the beginning of the previous reading from Vishnu Dharma Purana. And there it spoke about Dharma. There were 4 qualities, Jnanam, Vairagyam, Aishwaryam, and Dharma. So these 4 characteristics were the characteristics of the individual soul after liberation. So what is that Dharma? That Dharma is the Saddharmyam, Ishvara Saddharmyam. So he attains the same characteristics. Now here, in this particular case, Vishwanath Chakravarti, in his commentary, he says that sadharmya means swarupa lakshanam, or sarupya lakshanam, mukti. So he attains mukti, which is characterized by sarupya. So the 5 kinds of liberation, right? One of them is having the same kind of form as Krishna. But having the same kind of form doesn't necessarily mean having a 4-armed form in Vaikuntha. Having a gopi form is also sarupya, because one has a form like that of Krishna, which is a form that is fitting to engage in service and participate in the Nitya Lila. That's the kind of form that we want, a spiritual body. So Sarupya Mukti and Samipya Mukti, we're gonna discuss those later on. That's coming up very soon in Priti Sandarbha, because he's going to talk about these different kinds of muktis and evaluate them. But Baladev has another take. He says, mama, so the verse had, idam jnanam upasritya mama sadharmyam agata. So what is this mama sadharmyam? This is how he's explaining. He says, so mama, my, Krishna is saying my, that nitya avirbhuta gunashtakasya. So in Krishna, they're eternally present. In the jiva, they're not necessarily manifest when he's in his bound state. But that is sadhana virbhavitena. But through sadhana, they are made to manifest. These are the ashtaka, so this is the guna ashtaka. These are also taken from the Chandogya Upanishad. And the Chandogya Upanishad has this famous phrase, which is often used to continue the 8 characteristics of Brahman, or the Brahman state, or at least the liberated state. So he has here, Esha Atma Pahata Papma Vijaro Vimrityu Vishokaha Vijigatso Apipasaha Satyakamaha and Satya Sankalpaha. So he is free from any sin. Apahata Papma. So this Atma is free from sin. It is free from old age, Vijaro. Vimrityu is beyond death. Vishoko, beyond any kind of lamentation or grief. Vijagatso, without hunger. Apipasa, without thirst. Satyakama, its desires are true. The desires of the spiritual soul, the pure soul, has satya. He has satyakama. We saw previously also akamaha, nishkamaha, aptakamaha, and atmakamaha. So 4 kinds of kamas we're talking before in the previous Chandogya verse that was cited. So now here we have again the word satyakama, satya sankalpaha. So the intent or the will of the will to action. Sankalpa means the will to action. So the will to action or the intent is also true. It's satya. So desires of the realized or the pure soul, so the 8 qualities include true desire and true will or intent to action. And just one other thing, the second half of that verse, the sarge pinopajayante pralayena vyatanticha, that in the time of creation they're not reborn, and at the time of the dissolution of the universe they do not suffer, or at the time of destruction of the body they do not suffer. So at the time of death they do not suffer. So the verb there is in the plural. So Baladev notes that mokshe jiva bahutvam uktam. So there's a multiplicity of jivas even in the liberated state. So that's also important, because if they were all one, then there would be no distinction. There would be no separateness of the photons in the light. They would all be one seamless, indivisible entity. And that's also stated, he quotes, tad vishnoh paramang padam sada pashyanti suraya. So that pashyanti suraya is also plural that's used. Now one more, so he says, ubhayam choktam spashtameva. So the ubhayam, so both of these things, both these things, that similarity to and attainment. So we're talking about two things, right? One is that the similarity, and also there's an attainment. So that division, the being of one thing, and also the attainment of one thing, that both these things that are being in, one is being Brahman and one is also attaining Brahman. So the word Brahman is being used in two different ways. So we can't do that with Bhagavan. You don't become Bhagavan, except perhaps in the way that the gopis became Bhagavan. Right? That tadatmya-prāpta. Yesterday, towards the end of the reading, we talked about in the Rasa Lila, when the gopis are becoming tadatmya-prāpta, when tadatmika, they're imitating Krishna. They say, "I've become Krishna." Well, how is it that they've become Krishna? Well, Krishna's not gone away. Krishna has entered into me. I am Krishna. So that I am Krishna, this is actually the quality that's necessary, the sense of, and this is something that will perhaps come up later on, but the idea of in rasa, there has to be identification. One cannot experience rasa unless there is a sense of identity. If I love you, right, I have to have a sufficient amount of identity with you to understand your pleasures and your dislikes and your likes in order to be able to serve you. I have to, that ingite bujibo shabakaj, that I will be able to, because I have become one with the lila, I will know just from either from a subtle signal from the other gopis or from within. I will know what it is that gives pleasure to Radha and to Krishna, and I will perform that action. So that identification is a sign of love, the oneness of love that we've talked about before. That already says, that the unity in love is an identification, to be so close to the pleasures and pains of the loved object that one can anticipate them and serve in consequence, and to fulfill those desires that are present in the loved object. So here he quotes from the Katha Upanishad, where both these things are again found. Right? So yathodakam shuddhe shuddham asiktam tadrigeva bhavati. So he's going to focus on the words tadrigeva. The tadrik, not tadeva bhavati, but tadrigeva bhavati. He becomes like that, not he becomes that. So evang munir vijanata atma bhavati Gautama. Right? So this is, O Gautama, just as pure water poured into pure water verily becomes like that. The pure water into which it has been poured. In the same way, the self of an enlightened sage becomes like the absolute. So the important thing here is the tadrik. So here it's being clearly stated that it's not absolutely one, but it is simultaneously, it is similar. So that idea of similarity, samyam, and tadatmyam, these are the words that we are favoring over exact oneness and merging. We can use the word merge, why not? The gopis are merged. As it was that that we had, that was spoken of, that had that in Chaitanya Mata Manjusha, that he was there, Chaitanya Mata Manjusha, yes, it says that tanmayi bhava. Tanmayi bhava. Tadatmya and tanmayi bhava is really the same thing. When you become made, when your essence is so absorbed in the object of love that you become tanmaya. Tanmaya means fully attentive to something. Tanmayi bhava, when you have attained an attitude of total absorption in something. Samadhi. So here, tatraiva-kāreṇa na tu tadeva bhavati, na tu va tad-asādharmyeṇa prithak upalabhyate. So here he says the word only or exactly was tadrigeva. So he said that he didn't say tadeva. So the eva is emphasizing that is similarity. but at the same time, natuva tad-asādharmyeṇa upalabhyate, prisak upalabhyate. It's not characterized by It's not characterized by qualities that separate it from the object, from that which it has become one with. In other words, pure water mixed with pure water, there is no stain, there is no oil or dust or any other thing that can separate it or distinguish it from the characteristics of that into which it is mixed. So the gopis are totally, you can't find anything in the gopis that separates them from Radha and Krishna. They have their individual existence, but that individual existence is tadatmya prapta. It's totally, even if you accept the distinction, that distinction is never to be asādharmyeṇa prapta. It's never something that has non-Brahman qualities in it. So it is not available separately by its dissimilarity. That's what we have here. And there's another quote. So now, as we're saying, we get to getting to quotes that are, we proceed from the more difficult ones to the easier ones, right? To the ones that are more explicit. So here we have a verse from the Skanda Purana, 2 verses that have used the same example of water. So udake tudakam siktam misrameva yatha bhavet tadeva bhavati yato buddhi pravartate. Evameva hi jīvo'pi tad-ātmyaṁ paramātmana prāpto'pi naso bhavati svātantryādi-viśeṣaṇāt. Do I have it here? It doesn't seem I have the book here with me. All right. At any rate, just as when water is poured into water, it gets mixed. And we think that it has become that. Right here. So yato buddhi pravartate. Tadeva bhavati. So we think this one has become that. So similarly, evam eva hi jīvo'pi tadatmyaṁ paramatmana. So when a living being, even after attaining similarity, tadatmyaṁ, with the paramatma, naso bhavati, he does not become the paramatma, because it has qualities or attributes such as independence. So that this independence, there's a certain svātantrya. So the svātantrya is in the paramatma. So there are certain characteristics in the paramatma that don't, that due to the wholeness, due to the quantity, aspect of quantity, are not in both. All right, so I'm going to, so we have here, so now there's another aspect of idea that comes up that Jiva Goswami is briefly going to talk about. And I'm going to give you the reference from the tattva-sandarbha and the paramatma-sandarbha. And tattva-sandarbha is, it's 52. I have the wrong number here. 52 and 53 is a very long section in Paramatma-sandarbha in particular is quite long, 37. And you can, Babaji has really excelled in his commentary there and in his revelation, because he's quoting 2 sutras from the Vedanta Sutra. And so this is where the question of bimba-pratibimba-vad has been discussed in the Vedanta Sutra, and of course in Baladev's Govinda Bhashya, but also Jiva Goswami has his interpretation there. So it said the sutra is ambuda-grahaṇāt. ity-ādi-sūtra-dvaye gona eva yojitaha. So the idea of the reflection. There's a bimba and a pratibimba. So pratibimba means reflection. So the statement, the Mayavadis, so excuse me for using the forbidden word. Well, Mayavadi, Krishna Parati, we do say this. I mean, some people are worried that that the Vaishnavas are too nasty and cruel towards the Advaitavadis. Well, you know, we do have some quibbles. I do think that that Brahmavada is a rejection of Krishna, and it's a rejection of the love of God. And so, there are many statements in the scriptures and also in the words of devotees that kaivalyam narakayate, that to become one with Brahman is a kind of hellish existence. It's not really, of course, hell, because there's no suffering to be had there. But the concept itself strikes one as hellish, that is a kind of a hell that one has to go to if one loses one's sense of separateness. There's a nice verse by Hanuman, attributed to Hanuman. It says that where aham, tvam prabhur aham dasa, bhavan prabhur aham dasa, iti buddhya vilupyate. Is that I don't in any circumstances desire that state where I lose the sense that I am a servant and that you are my master. So that's in dasya rasa. But still, the idea is there that I'm an eternal servant. So if I lose that sense of service, lose that sense of separateness, then I can't experience the bliss of service, or I can't experience the bliss of seeing your happiness on receiving my service. That kind of thing. So, I'll just read this whole translation. This is a long translation. These are two sutras from the Vedanta Sutra. But the Vedanta Sutra is impossible to translate the Vedanta Sutra. To translate the Vedanta Sutra literally is a hopeless task. And so when one does translate it, one has to suss out all the different things that are being implied and all the references and so on that are underlying the argumentation. So let me read what we have here, and we have, this is also being, so this is the 3, 2, 19 and 20. Ambuda-grahaṇam, ambuda-grahaṇāt. I have the second verse here somewhere. All right, so I'm going to read both this translation and a bit of the commentary by Satyanarayan Dasji, based on, I think there's a translation of the Govinda Bhashya. So the water in a pond covers the land underneath and thus delimits it from the rest of the earth. But Brahman cannot be delimited in this way to become a jiva. Right? So the idea is that bimba-pratibimba states that the jiva is reflected in Maya. But in order to have a reflection, you have to have a delimitation. So Brahma doesn't have parts. So how can you, if you can't have parts, then how can it be reflected into something else? Because it is unlike the earth in this respect. In other words, it is without definable limits. So the comparison of Brahman to the earth is appropriate not in its primary sense of something capable of demarcation or division, but in its secondary sense, that of Brahman apparently participating in the increase or decrease, depending on the greatness or smallness of the particular adjuncts that it enters into and pervades, just as the land delimited by water may be of larger or smaller dimensions. This interpretation fulfills the purpose of the scriptural passages, and thus there is appropriateness of the thing illustrated, that is Brahman, and the illustration, the increase or decrease of delimited land. So again, this is an illustration, a drishtanta, and the drishtanta has certain aspects that are relevant and others that are not. So here he's saying what is relevant. It's appropriate to the thing illustrated, Brahman, but in a particular part, and that is the increase or decrease of the delimited land. So such statements are also spoken only to nourish the view of non-difference in those who desire jnana, and do not mean that the jiva is factually a reflection. This is because accepting the jiva as a reflection of Brahman is contrary even to the opinion of the preceptor of the monists, Shankara. On the basis of the sutra, it is not like a reflection of water. So ambuda-grahaṇāt. It is not like a reflection in water. Only the tiniest similarity to a reflection is accepted in the subsequent sutra. The example of increase and decrease in a reflection by the increase or decrease in water is secondary. Brahman appears to undergo these changes only because of adjuncts or upatis. Thus, because there is a similarity between the example and the exemplified, there is no contradiction. So I think that's a better translation, actually. So Advaitavadis may object that there are some, I think the second one is actually the Baladev. So Advaitavadis, the idea of earth, it's a little confusing. The idea of a reflection in water is the ambuda-grahaṇāt. So it's the water in the earth, in the size of the reflection. The water has to be contained in something in order to receive the reflection. So Advaitavadis may object that there are sometimes statements in the Shastras that describe the jiva as a mere reflection of the Supreme. This would mean that the jiva has no independent existence in the ultimate sense. But that is also not true, for it has already been stated that the jiva is an eternal part of the Supreme Soul. Such statements that speak of the jiva as a mere reflection or as one with Brahman in all aspects are there only to nourish the sentiments of the followers of the Jnana Marga. They cannot mean that the jiva is really a reflection of the Paramatma. For Vedanta Sutra 3.2.20, the second of the two verses, denies this, and even Sri Shankaracharya, while commenting on it, does not accept the jiva as such in the real sense. The examples of a reflection is given to show that the Atma is dependent on the Paramatma and is not influenced by the modifications in the body. So the water can be bigger or smaller, the reflection can be bigger or smaller, but the sun doesn't change. So the reflection is, the water body is bigger or smaller, but the reflection doesn't change. Right? The conclusion is that the jiva is an eternal part of the Paramatma. And another one. So here, this is, again, this is quoted from the Chandogya Upanishad. So, evam evaisha saṁprasādo'smāc sharirat samuttaya parang jyoti upasampadya svena rupena abhi sampadhyate ity-atrapi tathaiva-bheda-pratipaditaha. So here also difference is being established in this statement. In this way, this blessed one, getting out of this body, attaining the supreme effulgent body, becomes situated in his own form. Evam, in this way, eva aisha, this Atma, being blessed, saṁprasāda, asmat sharirat samuttaya, rising up out of this body, parang jyotir upasampadya, attaining the supreme effulgent body, jyoti rupam, becomes situated, rupen, svena rupena abhi sampadhyate. So his form is a form of light, a form of spiritual light. That's it. So this one you should look for. This is a Tattva Sandarbha 53. So these things in Tattva Sandarbha 53 And Paramatma-sandarbha 37, that's where these things are discussed at length. And I suggest if you're going to study them there, that one should study it with Babaji's commentary in order to get the full benefit. So, so here, Baladev is in that commentary on Tattva Sandarbha. Baladev, he cites that anyarthascha paramarsha. So anyarthascha paramarsha is a Vedanta sutra. And the meaning of it is that deliberation on the jiva is in order to know the other, paramatma. So by trying to understand the essential nature of the jiva, that's one way. By knowing the part, one tries to know the whole. Right? One cannot entirely know the whole through the part, but one gets some inclination or inkling of what it is. So that is he says, an example is given, the man in the cave learns about the sun from understanding the sun's ray. So something is the similarity there. And now here, so this is also from Paramatma 37. This is a verse that's discussed extensively there. And it's a difficult verse because it appears to be saying something quite different. But Jiva Goswami's ingenious explanation. And the Vishnu Purana is very Advaita in its orientation in some places. It's a very interesting text, Vishnu Purana, because many of the things that we base our philosophy on, the separation of energies, of internal tatastha and external energies, and the idea of the fire and the heat and light and so on. There are a number of verses in the Vishnu Purana that are very fundamental to the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. But in the latter part of the Vishnu Purana, one sees a return to statements that are very strongly Advaita in their nature. So this verse comes from in the sixth angsha, the sixth part of the right near the very end of the Vishnu Purana, and the word says the verse had the part that he says. Well, let me just read the whole verse because he doesn't quote it here. It says vibheda-janake'jñāne vibheda-janake'jñāne nāṣam ātyantikam gate atmano brahmano bhedam asantam ka.u. So, well, we'll read the way that Baba says. In the Vishnu Purana, there's a verse that says, even when the ignorance that produces the perception of difference is fully destroyed, who will render non-existent the difference between the individual self and Brahman? So, of course, it's not translated that way and nor does Sridhar Swami interpret it that way. The word asantam in the present participle with the prefix a, so the non-being as not being. So who will render non-existent the not-being of the difference, the bhedam asantam. Ka.u. Who would make the difference non-being? Okay? So who would make that the difference does not exist? Who would render non-existent the difference between the individual self and Brahman? So this is a lengthy discussion there in Paramatma-sandarbha 53, and I really suggest that you go and read that carefully in order to understand what's being stated. All right, so he says here, so the argument is, and the essence of the argument there is that vibheda-janake'jñāne nāṣam ity-ādau devādi-bheda-nāśānantaraṁ brahmatmanor bhedam nakopi asantam karishyati apitu santam eva karishyati iti vyakyatam eva. So this is where he says. So he says in this verse it is said that even after the differences such as that of gods and humans and so on have been eliminated, who will belie or negate the difference between Brahman and the Atma? Rather, they will surely establish it. So, evam eva tika kritbi sammatang. So here we come to the end now. And so, evam eva tika kritbihi sammatang sri gopanama brahma sampatyanantaram api vaikuntha darshanam. So this is a very important section of the Bhagavatam that's being spoken of. So the Tika Krit is Sridhar Swami. So even Sridhar Swami has accepted. This is the important verse there, 10:28:15, right? Where it says that, that's, I should really, let me see if I have it here. Sorry, let me just dig it out here. There we go. So this is the verse from the, so now, well, it's probably worth just discussing a little bit the context here. So you remember the 28th chapter of the 10th canto. This is where Nanda Maharaj is stolen away by Varuna. So Varuna, Krishna goes to Varuna Loka and he tells Varuna, you can't do this. And he brings Nanda Maharaj back. So Varuna also comes back and the cowherds, and they get to see another one of these great displays of glory of Krishna, that even someone as exalted as Varuna is folding his hands and offering prayers to Krishna. So they become mystified by it, and they start to think that maybe Krishna is God after all, or at least he's got some special characteristics that they have to know. So what they do is they say, here we go, so let's go through it. What they do is, so te chotsukya dio rajan matva gopastamishwaram apinak swagatim sukshmam upadhasyat adhishwaram. So they become all enthusiastic and they start to think that he must be God. And so they get curious and they say, well, what's going to be our subtle destination? In other words, where do we go after we die? And so they presented this question to Krishna. So Krishna says, iti swanam sabhagavan vigyaya kila drikswayam, or they were thinking it, they didn't actually come in, sankalpa siddhaye tesham kripaya tad achintayat. So knowing, being all-knowing and all-seeing, Krishna knew what they were thinking, what they wanted to know, what their desire was. And so in order to help them realize their intent, he started to think as follows. He said, Jano vailoka etasmin avidya kama karmabhi uchavachasu gatishu naveda swam gatim Brahman. So people in this world, being governed by ignorance and by the results of their pious and sinful activities, are going taking different births in up higher and lower species, and they do not know what is their ultimate destination. So there's iti sanchintya bhagavan mahakariniko hari. So that one has a very long commentary, because of course the gopas, they're in a state, they're eternally liberated, but they're presenting themselves as conditioned souls. And of course they think of themselves as ordinary human beings who are in the material world and who are suffering the consequences of their actions and so on. And so they think that they have a separate destination. Oh, good. This is part of the what's underlying here. but it's not really what Jiva is citing this section for. He's rather citing it because he wants it to be known that they were already situated in the liberated state, and so for them to have another destination, that this is actually a state of a false understanding, but it's being done for the sake of the reader here. So iti sanchintya bhagavan mahakaruniko hari darshayamasa lokam swam gopanam tamasah param. So thinking like this, the more all-merciful Hari, he showed to them his own world, which is also the world of the cowherds, and is beyond the darkness of the material realm. Tamasah param. So tamasah param, these are words now that we're getting into Upanishadic language. So this is where you see how the Bhagavatam reverts to the language of the Upanishads. Satyam jnanam anantam yat brahma jyoti sanatanam yadhi pashyanti munayo gunapaye samahitaha. So this tamasah param, swam lokam tamasah param, is this darshayamasa lokam swam gopanang tamasah param satyam jnanam anantam. So satyam jnanam anantam, that's the Mahavakya diction there. Yad Brahma Jyoti Sanatanam, the eternal light of Brahman, which is seen by the munis after all in their state of samadhi, after all the material characteristics or all the material qualities have been removed. And these commentaries here are extremely long in the Bhagavatam. So now, then you have tatetu brahmahradang nita magnaha krishnena chodritaha dadrishur brahmano lokam yatra kruro jagat pura. So then he took them, they were taken to the Brahmahrada, to the lake of Brahma, and there they were immersed by Krishna, and Krishna lifted them out of the water. And when they were lifted out, then they saw the world of Brahman. Dadrishur Brahmano lokam, yatra kruro jagat pura. So the Brahmahrada, that's where Akrura, this is an interesting thing that says where Akrura had previously seen the form of Narayan, which actually didn't happen before, it happens after, in a later chapter here. And then the chapter says, Nandadayastutam drishtva paramananda nivritaha krishnang cha tatra chandobihi stuyamanang suvismitaha. So the Nanda and the rest of the Gopas, they saw that world of Brahman and were filled with the joy of supreme bliss. And then they became astonished to see in that world Krishna being praised by the Vedic mantras. And finally, the last verse of the chapter. Oops, that is the last verse of the chapter. So it depends on the numbering. Right? It's usually 18 verses. But that's the 17th verse. So now to get back to what Jiva Goswami is talking about, that the tika kridbihi, these verses, by the way, are extremely extensively discussed in Krishna Sandarbha. But here, what he has is that, what did Sridhar have to say here? In his commentary to the 15th verse, he says that dehadi pihitanang darshanam ashakyam iti prasamam dehadi vyatiriktam brahma swarupam darshayamasa. So Sridhar Swami says that for people who are covered by the material body and the material consciousness, they cannot see this Brahman. So therefore, before he could show it, he had to reveal to them their own Brahma Swarupa. So before they could see the external Brahman, first he had to give them their Brahma Swarupa. Just like Krishna when he's showing Arjuna the universal form, he says, you can't see me with these eyes, so let me give you divyang dadami te chakshu. So the divyang chakshu is the eyes that are made of spiritual energy. Ataksri Krishna namadi navaved grahyam indriyai sevon mukhe hijihvado swayameva sfuratyadaha. So the material senses cannot chant the holy name. The material eyes cannot see Krishna. The material ears cannot hear the topics of Krishna. But if one has the desire to do so, if that desire is pure, then Krishna's form, name, pastimes, his world, the Brahmaloka. This Brahmaloka is not the Brahmaloka of Lord Brahma, by the way. And this is the Brahmaloka that he's talking about here, is the world of Brahman, meaning the world of Bhagavan. So, conclusion. So, tasmat sadhu vyakhyatam yadyesho parata ity-ādi tadevam brahma sampattir vyakhyata. So he's saying that now, so the verse in 34, yadyesho parata, that when the sadasad rupe, the material forms, the gross and subtle forms, when they're removed, and when Maya, the avidya in the self has been removed, then one can attain vision of Brahman, one can attain tad-brahma darshanam. So this, you have to go back and look at the third and fourth anucheds. So this is the conclusion. He says, so that was properly, so therefore the verse 1.3.34 was properly explained. And in this is now, he says, in this way, Brahma realization, the word sampatti is being used, Brahma sampatti, the treasure or the attainment. So sampatti, when he uses sampatti, just like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he uses sampatti, meaning the sampatti of, he has the sampatti dasha. So he sampatti dasha, after death, one attains one's siddha swarup in the nitya world. So that's the sampatti dasha. So then that's when one has sampatti, then no one can take it away. All right, let's just read the remaining part of Babaji's commentary. It's a little bit long here, but we'll go through it. So, an Advaita-vadi may raise an objection as follows. In the Shruti statements, such as Brihadaranyaka and Mundaka, the ones that were quoted earlier, it is clearly stated that the jiva becomes Brahman. So how can Advaita-vada be wrong? So this jiva responds by saying that if studied properly, these Shruti statements are not describing oneness. There is a clear distinction between the jiva as an agent and Brahman as an object of achievement or knowledge. The agent, the karta, and the object, karma, of the verb achieve cannot be the same. So the same is true of the verb to know, Veda. The meaning of these statements, becoming Brahman and becomes Brahman, Brahmaiva son and Brahma bhavati, is not that the jiva actually becomes Brahman. One living being cannot become another. However, if it is argued that the jiva is Brahman to begin with, and only by the influence of Maya thinks itself to be different from Brahman, then the verbs becoming or becomes become useless or misleading. The true import of these verbs is that the jiva acquires some of the nature of Brahman. This similarity is supported by the Shruti. So then the later Shruti quotes from Mundaka 3.1.3 and Katha Upanishad and the Bhagavad Gita, Mama Sadharmyam Agata. Brahman is described as free from sin, old age, death, grief, hunger, and thirst. His wish and desire always come true. So those are the 8 qualities that we mentioned, that apahata papma, vijaro, vimrityu, vishoko, vijigatsa, apipasa, satyakama, satyasankalpa. So the jiva acquires these qualities. A mukta jiva, a liberated jiva, does not acquire all the properties of Brahman, as stated in the Vedanta Sutra 4.4.17. A mukta has all the powers of Brahman except that to create, maintain, and destroy the universe, because this is understood from the context and non-proximity. Now, those things all need to explain. You have to go to see that verse, that sutra, to understand properly. The verses cited from Skanda Purana also state that the jiva does not acquire qualities such as independence, svātantrya. Thus, it does not become ontologically one with Brahman as advocated by Advaitavad. The state of the jiva is clearly described in the statement from Katha Upanishad as well as from Skanda Purana about the water, merging with the water. The indeclinable eva in Katha clearly affirms the similarity and not the oneness with Brahman. The words samya and tadatmya both mean sameness or identity of nature or character with something else. Similarly, samyata is possible only when there are 2 objects. So something you're only going to say, well, this is the same as that. You have to have 2 things to be the same. There is no sense in saying an object is the same or similar to itself. Similar, tadatmya, like an iron piece taking on the qualities of heat when placed in fire, also requires 2 different entities. One cannot become tadatmya with oneself. Sometimes the word ekatva is used. This is because the jiva cannot be experienced separate from Brahman in that state. The example of water mixed with water is an appropriate example for this. When a cup of water is poured into the ocean, it does not mean the cup full of water has become the ocean. It exists in the ocean but cannot be seen as separate from it. For this reason, it is said that the jiva becomes Brahman or is one with Brahman. To explain this simultaneous oneness and difference, Jiva Goswami proposes the relationship of achintya bheda-bheda. The jiva is neither absolutely one with Brahman nor separate from it. One may argue that the jivas are not real. They are just the reflections of Brahman in avidya. It is just like the sun reflecting in many pots of water. If the pot is broken, then no harm is done to the sun. This principle is supported by 2 Vedanta Sutras, 3, 2, 19, and 20. Sri Jiva Goswami says that these sutras are not supporting the Advaitavada principle of one jiva. So this is the Advaitavada talk about one jiva, meaning Brahman. That in the material world there's one jiva reflected into many, into avidya. The example of the sun is to be taken in a secondary sense. The sun is not influenced by the increase or decrease in the reflecting water. That's the important point to be taken from the example. In the same way, Brahman is not affected by the pains or pleasures of a jiva. The sun is independent, but the reflection is dependent on it. In the same way, Brahman is independent and the jiva is under its control. It is the jiva that is conditioned by maya like the reflection is conditioned by water. Brahman, however, remains free of any conditioning. Any movement in the water shakes the reflection, but not the sun. And finally, the mantra from the Chandogya Upanishad describes the final mukti. It explains that after giving up the material body, the jiva acquires an effulgent form, jyoti rupam, and becomes situated in his own form, swena rupena. This can mean 2 things. In the case of Brahman realization, the spiritualist becomes free of both the subtle as well as the gross body and shines in his glory. Even if this meaning is taken, then also the jiva does not become Brahman. He just attains his own self. The other meaning is applicable to Bhagavan realization. In this case, the practitioner drops both his bodies and attains an effulgent spiritual body, jyoti rupam. This is his own natural form, svena rupena, and is described in the story of Narada, that when a divine body was awarded to me, my prarabdha karma came to an end and my material body dropped down. In both types of interpretations, the jiva does not become Brahman. So the Sri Jiva also cites a verse from Vishnu Purana that asks a rhetorical question, that when the ignorance, the cause of variety in our experience, is dispelled, who will make the absence of non-difference between the Jiva and Krishna and Brahman become present? It is keeping this in mind that Sridhar Swami has explained in his commentary on verses 14 to 18 of the 20th chapter that the cowherd boys, after experiencing Brahman, saw Vaikuntha. If experience of Brahman means becoming one with it and losing one's identity, then there is no possibility to see Vaikuntha after that. Thus, the explanation of the verse 1.3.34 in Anuched 4, explaining the realization of Brahman, is appropriate. The experience of bliss in this state is called wealth or sampatti. All right. Jai Sri Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe. Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari.